Hello, everyone, and welcome. We've got ourselves a special presentation here. This is Every Console Scandal Explained by Video Game Guy. Now, if you'll notice, if you've seen my channel at all, you'll know that this is going to be right up in my area of interest. Oh, yes, I cannot wait for this one. There we go. Alright, let's get this bitch started.
Coleco Chameleon. In 2015, retro fans were buzzing about a new cartridge-based system called the Retro VGS. The pitch was simple, a modern console that would bring back the spirit of the 80s and 90s, running brand new games on cartridges with no patches, no downloads, and no digital headaches.
Except that this isn't really anything that you couldn't already do with either pre-existing consoles or with clone consoles, right? You know, there are still games being made for the Super Nintendo, for the Sega Genesis, and the NES, and all that other. Are there games being made for the Master System? I don't think there are. You know, it's kind of hard to justify making cartridges for the Master System. But aside from that, you know, there's nothing here that you couldn't already do, right?
Later rebranded as the Coleco Chameleon after striking a deal to use the Coleco name, the project promised a bold revival of physical gaming.
Which was not well executed. This is like one of the first really big like retro nostalgia gaming scams, right? Like you'll see later, they were presenting something very different than what they actually had on hand.
But then the prototype was shown at Toy Fair 2016, and everything started to unravel.
Oh, things were unraveling already. It had become this thing to where they blew up the price. They were offering all these collector's editions and all these colors, and you know, they had the main controller for the system, which turned out to be a third-party Wii U pad, like a Wii U third-party Pro controller. Like, this thing was an abortion even leading up to the Toy Fair. Like, there was a lot of, shall we say, scuttlebutt around that. You know, since they tried to do Kickstarter, but once they learned Kickstarter, you needed a prototype, they went to Indiegogo. And they'd been so dodgy about trying to show an actual prototype unit, because it was supposed to be a distinct system for whatever reason. Again, not sure why they didn't just go for a super high quality clone console like what you see from Analog. You know, that you could have probably gotten away with that for $200 easy. But let's see what they're doing.
Eagle-eyed fans noticed something odd. The clear plastic shell revealed internal hardware that looked suspiciously like a capture card.
Oh yes, this was actually after the Toy Fair, because the Toy Fair, right? It was discovered that the back of the demo unit was kind of taped up, and they were using a Super Nintendo cartridge for the demo. So the speculation was that they'd just taken the innards of an SNES Junior, later model SNES, one of the, you know how they miniaturized the consoles later on there in the system lifespan. And the idea was that the scuttlebutt was that there was a Super Nintendo Junior in there instead of an actual prototype, and the tape was because it didn't quite fit perfectly, so they had to do that to kind of hide the fact that they were using Super Nintendo connectors.
Board jammed inside. A week earlier, a different prototype had been exposed as literally a gutted SNES Junior motherboard.
That's what I was talking about right there. You know, this, as you can see, is a lot smaller than the main Super Nintendo board, which most people would be familiar with. You know, this was like a cost-cutting console towards the end of the Super Nintendo's life. But yeah, it just, the Chameleon stank to high heaven for the whole thing.
Stuffed into a Jaguar shell. When confronted...
Oh yes, that was the other thing, the Jaguar shell. The Jaguar shell, after Atari Corporation folded, they sold that to some dental firm, the molds, right? And then the guy in charge, whose name is escaping me at the moment, bought them, and for a while they were selling replacement Jaguar shells, right? And then then he came up with this idea of the retro VGS, this dream of his. He decided that that was going to be the console shell. It was just going to be the Jaguar shell. You could just see it from the icon here on the upper right corner. It was just the Jaguar shell with some rebranding, and I'm guessing those were going to be USB ports in the front. You know, that's where the Jag controllers would go into normally. But yeah, this whole thing was slapdash as all hell.
Fronted. The team behind the Chameleon offered conflicting explanations, but the internet had already torn the project apart. Within days, Coleco Holdings yanked their support, stating they could no longer back the system. The Chameleon was never released, refunds were promised but never materialized in full, and the console quickly became a textbook case of vaporware.
And one of very many cautionary tales to come out of the sort of golden age of Kickstarter and Indiegogo and all that indie funding stuff. You know, this is not that far removed from stuff like Mighty Number 9, for example, but that's another video.
What was billed as a retro comeback ended up being remembered as one of the most brazen console scams of all time.
Pretty brazen.
No one except the investors who bought in early. ZX Spectrum Vega Plus.
Oh my god. Oh man, this is like the founder of the Vega project turned out to be a bit weird. Like they couldn't get a prototype either, and you know they lost the Spectrum name. They I think the founder was talking about like child sex robots or some shit like that. Like this was a whole mess. I might look at the Slopes game room on that over here just to refresh us all on it, because that was a fucking ride.
Back in 2016, a team of British developers promised something that tugged at nostalgia: the ZX Spectrum Vega Plus. It was marketed as a handheld revival of the legendary home computer that had defined gaming in the UK during the 80s.
Hey, a little picture from Tiza's collection. Yeah, that's awesome. It should be noted that unlike the Chameleon people, the Vega Plus was meant to be a sequel to a system that did come out, the ZX Spectrum Vega, which was like a little plug and play over there in the UK, right? So they at least had a product, but yeah, this became an absolute abortion.
The pitch was irresistible. Hundreds of classic Spectrum titles built in, sleek portable design, and the chance to carry a slice of gaming history in your pocket. Fans rushed to back the project on Indiegogo, pouring in nearly £500,000.
£500,000. Gee, that's let me grab my phone real quick. Fuck is £500,000? Okay, let's see here. Pounds to dollar. Let's try that. All right. So 500,000 pounds is $673,215. So yeah, it's got really nice funding.
But once the money changed hands, the dream started to unravel. Updates were scarce, deadlines were missed, and every promised release date slipped further away. Worse, the few units that eventually did trickle out looked rushed and unfinished.
Oh yeah, that was another thing. Like after they lost the Sinclair name, they just threw everything out there, and the systems were kind of like this, yeah. Like they were very sloppy. They didn't have any games on them. I don't think they had any games on them because they didn't have any licenses. It was just a mess from start to finish.
cheap shells, unresponsive controls, and barely functional software.
That's
Backers
right.
felt strung along, and the longer the delays dragged on, the more frustrated they became. Eventually, Indiegogo itself stepped in, demanding answers and even refunds for supporters who'd been left in the dark. By the time the dust settled, the Vega Plus had become infamous, not as a triumphant Spectrum comeback, but as a cautionary tale of crowdfunded disaster, which should have been a celebration of retro gaming turned into one of the most public scam console meltdowns in modern memory.
It was pretty high up there. I mean, obviously we didn't hear it that much here because, you know, who the fuck cares about the Spectrum in America, right? But yeah, that was that was a ride, man. It amazes me how blatant and how brazen some of these things can be.
Soldier Game.
Does anything else need to be said? This idiot selling dropship consoles from China with copyrighted ROMs, and he didn't think he was going to get in trouble?
In late 2018, rapper Soulja Boy shocked the gaming world when he suddenly announced he was launching his own line of consoles, the Soulja Game console and the Soulja Game handheld. The pitch was bold: hundreds of built-in games, compatibility with major platforms.
You see, this is the first thing you can tell, right? These bull shots, they're using these very nice 3D renders. That is a telltale trick that a lot of the Chinese bootleg console sellers use, right? They make you think it's gonna be this awesome thing, and then you get the console and it can barely run NES. It's such a normal scam that I can't believe people fall for it. You see this in like malls and stuff.
In a flashy new brand led by a celebrity. The problem? Gamers quickly realized these consoles were nothing more than cheap, mass-produced emulation boxes from China.
Also, calling Soulja Boy a celebrity at this point, like, he was already, he'd been on his way out of the mainstream for a while. You know, his star hadn't been shining brightly for several years at this point. This was sort of a desperate attempt to get back into the limelight, and it went about as well as you'd expect.
The Soulja Game logo slapped on top. The listings boasted libraries of thousands of games. Almost all of them were unlicensed ROMs.
Yep.
Nintendo, Sony, Sega, you name it. Their games were being advertised without permission. Tech reviewers who bought the systems discovered laggy performance, clunky menus, and hardware identical to devices already being sold online for a fraction of the price.
Like I said, telltale sign that you're dealing with a cheap Chinese box, right? And you know this, and this thing was being upcharged to high heaven. Like, I forget the exact prices, but I know it was a lot more than these pieces of barely functional plastic were deserving.
The gaming community tore it apart. Before long, legal pressure was rumored to have arrived at Soulja Boy's doorstep. Within weeks, the consoles disappeared from his online store. Soulja tried to play it off, claiming he had big plans and even teasing future consoles, but those never materialized. What was sold as a groundbreaking entry into the gaming industry turned out to be a blatant rebrand scheme, remembered as one of the most infamous scam consoles in history.
Yep. That was... oh man, that was... I mean, it was so obvious, even from the jump. I would be surprised if more than like 100 people fell for it. Like, excluding the YouTubers who were using the shit for content. Like, there's no way anybody actually thought this was going to be anything other than a piece of crap.
Phantom.
Oh, this is like the... Oh, God, this has to be the oldest one. This had to be like... God damn, was this when the Xbox and PS2 were out? Like the all-digital console that we still don't really have, you know, because even to this day we have consoles with the option for discs on them, because, you know, nobody really trusts the big three anymore.
In the early 2000s, a mysterious company called Infinium Labs
Also, that is such a scam fucking name. Like, everything about this is like rushing memories into my head, man.
started hyping what they called the Phantom console.
Wait a minute, let me see.
Remembered as one of the most...
Let me make sure.
Called
Yeah, the 2000s, exactly.
Hyping what they called the Phantom console. The pitch sounded like science fiction at the time, a sleek living room device that would let you instantly download and play PC games over the internet. No discs, no cartridges, just a massive digital library at your fingertip.
Also, apparently no actual hardware of its own. This was supposed to be, if I remember correctly, it was also supposed to be like a streaming box. Like, they were selling a dream. An absolute dream.
In an era before Steam had really taken off, that sounded revolutionary. But there was one small problem. The Phantom never actually existed.
Yep.
For years, Infinium Labs released flashy press statements and mock-up images but never showed a working prototype. Trade shows came and went with empty promises of launching soon. Then things got uglier. The SEC investigated and later charged the company's CEO with fraud tied to a shady stock promotion scheme.
Oh. This I didn't know. The FCC got involved. This was for,
Alleging investors were misled. By 2006, the whole project had collapsed, leaving nothing but vaporware headlines and angry backers who had bought into the hype.
Hey, backers? Like, this was before crowdfunding. What kind of backers? Did he mean the investors? Because I don't remember there being a lot of grassroots funding for this thing back then. Like, again, this is the early 2000s. People weren't quite as plugged in as we are today, but I don't remember hearing these guys going for donations. So this guy must be talking about like investors, something like that.
The Phantom name became ironic because the console itself was just that, a ghost.
You see, this guy missed an opportunity. Like, he should have had this mock-up just vanish when he said that. The Phantom was a perfect name. And then having a puff of smoke and the thing's not there. That's what you should have done.
It's remembered today as one of the most infamous gaming scams, proof that sometimes the boldest promises are just smoke and mirrors.
Sometimes? No. Most of the time. Anybody trying to make big statements like that, they're trying to sell you some snake oil, dog. Always, always, always be critical, especially nowadays.
Today is one of the most infamous gaming scams, proof that sometimes the boldest promises are just smoke and mirrors. Gamers never saw a single real unit, only broken promises. Ouya.
Fun fact. I don't know if I still have it, but I actually bought one of these, not because I gave a shit, but because I just wanted because it was cheap and I wanted a front row seat to the shit show. Like, this was such a stupid fucking console. I remember I put it on the TV, and the first thing they ask you is for your fucking credit card information. It's the most like, they were so. This was such a poorly thought out unit. And the controller felt like there were Mad Catz controllers from back in the day that felt better than that damn controller. I don't know if I still have that system. I need to check. I might have chucked it when the novelty wore off, but I'll have to look around.
When the Ouya hit Kickstarter in 2012, it looked like the future. A tiny Android-powered console for just $99, open to indie developers and free from the corporate giants of Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo.
Yeah, this never looked like the goddamn future. This was a sort of an idea to get like indie games, like small indie games, onto on the home screens, because this was like when mobile gaming was starting to actually be thought of as actually legitimate and not just a fucking time wasting scam. You know, a lot of indies would be on the phones or like on Steam or whatever, trying to get their names out, and this was billed as a chance to get, you know, those games in a console environment.
Backers poured in, raising over $8 million,
Oh.
making it one of the most successful gaming Kickstarters ever. The hype was massive, but the delivery was something else entirely.
Oh, it was something
Itself
else on
felt
it.
unfinished. The controller was clunky, the interface laggy, and the game library was packed with mobile ports rather than console quality experiences.
Also, like, those two silver plates, like, you see the two silver stripes on either side of the controller, you have to take those out because each of those hid a battery base. There'd be one AA battery on each leg. I guess you call it leg or grip or whatever. And you had to pull those plates out and it was a bitch getting them back in. And oh god, this thing was shit, man. What I ended up doing was, when I started using it as an emulator box, I would just plug a third-party controller and then try to figure out what fucking buttons did what. And that was a lot better, even though it was, like the guy said, not just the interface, the actual games were laggy. Like, if you ever played like an NES game on this thing, and then on an emulator on the PC, you would notice the response time very quickly.
But the biggest blow was the so-called Free the Games Fund. Ouya announced they'd match crowdfunding campaigns for developers making Ouya exclusives.
And there were developers who would basically put the money in themselves to try to get the Ouya money. But then also, they realized that you had to be an exclusive game to the Ouya. I think it was like for a year, which is holy shit. You know, that's killing your game, isn't it? But yeah, there was so much nonsense with this Free the Games program.
Sounds great, except shady campaigns started popping up with suspiciously few backers pledging massive amounts of money.
Exactly, which turned out to be the developers themselves, like I said.
All to grab Ouya's matching funds. The program quickly became a scandal, with accusations of fraud and exploitation.
Yep.
To make things worse, developers who did work with Ouya often complained of late payments or, later on, no payments at all after the company was bought by Razer.
Ah, yes, the buyout. Razer's purchase was pretty much at the end of the Ouya. They were basically just buying them out for properties and stuff like that. They never had any intention of keeping the Ouya going. So why any developer thought that anything else was going to happen is like super, super, super beyond me.
What started as a dream of changing console gaming ended as a cautionary tale of overpromises, mismanagement, and outright broken trust.
And the lady who founded Ouya, she went on to found like a women's soccer team, and she's still grinding, which, respect for that, but she says as little as possible about the Ouya nowadays. Oh boy.
The Ouya went from hero to scam symbol in record time. Did you own any of these consoles? Let me know in the comments below. Atari?
Well, like I said, I had the Ouya for a little bit. Piece of shit. Not worth keeping.
Atari VCS. When Atari announced the Atari VCS in 2017, it immediately sparked curiosity.
Did it though? I remember a lot of people being skeptical about it because what people don't realize is that this Atari is not Atari Corp, which again was dissolved into a hard drive maker. Like I think they call it a reverse merger, but it wasn't Atari that was going to keep going. So that name the name got bought out by Hasbro. And then, I think by Infogram, who uses them now, who changed their name. So this is basically Infogram wearing the Atari skin suit.
It was one of the most iconic brands in gaming history, claiming it was coming back with a hybrid console PC system, something that could stream, emulate classics, and even run modern games.
Well, they got the funny part is, from what I understand, if you're not using it for gaming, it's actually a pretty decent like Linux box. You could use it for general purpose. But the gaming part, it didn't really perform well.
The company launched an Indiegogo campaign that pulled in over $3 million, with promises of shipping by mid-2019. Backers imagined a modern revival of the Atari name, sleek and nostalgic. But the reality was delay after delay. Reports surfaced of leadership shakeups, engineers walking away, and constant missed deadlines.
Oh yeah, this thing took forever to come out. And even when it did, I'm gonna be real with you, I've never seen one in the wild, right? I've never seen one like in a store, right? It's only ever been, like, it could just be a Miami thing, but like I have never seen this thing in a store. It's only been available online, as far as I can tell.
By the time the system finally trickled out in 2021, it was priced far higher than the promised $249 entry point. landing
Yep.
closer to $400.
Yep.
What was shipped wasn't the revolutionary console Atari had teased.
It was a barely, like I said, it was an okay-ish Linux machine. Not really a gaming powerhouse. Certainly nothing that would have been anything to write home about by the time 2021 rolled around.
Instead, it was essentially a small, underpowered PC running a custom Linux interface. Reviews called it overpriced and pointless compared to a real gaming PC or even cheaper alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, they ain't wrong. You know, at this point, PS3 and 360 were pretty cheap. You could probably get a decent mid-range PC for $400, like if you weren't gonna max out all the settings, right? Yeah, this thing just didn't really have a place.
Many backers felt scammed. They waited years, spent far more than expected, and got a product that didn't live up to a fraction of its promises.
Oh yeah.
The Atari VCS didn't just flop. It cemented Atari's modern reputation as a brand trading nostalgia for quick cash.
Although I will say this about Atari, Infoground, their Plus platform seems like they're doing something very interesting. You know, instead of trying to create this weird modern classic hybrid, like they're really leaning into those old systems, right? You know, 26 and 7800, and they're making pretty decent quality stuff, especially compared to the old At Games pieces of shit you used to get back in the day.
Amico.
Oh yeah, this one, Tommy Tallarico's scam box.
The Intellivision Amico was pitched in 2018 as a family-friendly console designed to bring back couch gaming without the complexity of modern systems.
Mind you, this was like 2 years, as you can see, 2 years after the Ouya came out. I'll say give or take a year after the Ouya fell apart, and it's looking even weirder than the Ouya, if that's possible.
Spearheaded by former video game composer Tommy Tallarico,
And current musician, still going around on Video Games Lab. I think my man needs to go back to video game composing, because trying to run a company just ain't it.
the Amico promised simple games, affordable pricing, and innovative touchscreen controllers.
And didn't deliver a damn thing. Like, the price kept creeping up over the years. It's kind of like what happened to the Chameleon.
The pitch struck a chord with retro fans, and pre-orders rolled in.
Again, there's no reason for this product to be this weird, expensive thing, because not only can you do similar stuff with like clone consoles or what have you, later on you would have the Evercade, which was cheaply priced and used multi-carts, which became a sort of way for publishers with a backlog or for indies to put their stuff out as a physical media for a lot less money. So all these people trying to reinvent the wheel, and it turned out the Evercade was, just doing what had been done, and just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of thing.
The system originally scheduled to launch in October 2020, but the Amico never arrived.
And it kept getting delayed, and Tommy Tallarico kept asking for money, and then he ran out like a bitch.
Instead, it entered a cycle of delay after delay, pushed to 2021, then 2022.
Oh! Forgot to mention, this was originally the Intellivision Amico, right? Because Tallarico had bought the Intellivision name. And they would run with that for a few years until that was sold to Atari, ironically. Not before some other properties were sold off to other publishers. Basically, this was a shit show from the beginning.
Then soon, without ever materializing at scale, updates became increasingly vague, with Tallarico posting promotional videos while backers demanded clarity. Some Founders Edition units trickled out, but they were essentially test devices, not mass-market products. Meanwhile, the company kept soliciting new investments, even as it admitted cash flow issues. By 2024, Intellivision quietly announced it was winding down and pivoting away from making hardware.
He forgot to mention that originally the promise was for physical games, right? The problem is when the first games were released, they turned out to be RFID cards, right? So you would scan the card and the game would download. So there were no physical games for this thing either. And the controllers, you can see, is just way too damn complicated, even compared to the original Intellivision controller. This was just an abortion.
The Amico never had a real launch, leaving pre-order customers angry and skeptical about refunds. What was supposed to be a wholesome reboot of a beloved 80s brand ended up as one of the gaming's most high-profile crowdfunding scams.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, and it tanked the Atari Age reputation. It caused a whole bunch of infighting among smaller gaming YouTubers of the time, and all of that for nothing. And now they're going to do what they should have done, which is put the simpler games on other platforms. Might I suggest, if you want to do physical games, you could put them on the Evercade. You could do that.
Instead of family fun, the Amico delivered years of excuses, broken promises, and a fading logo.
Yep.
PS3 Other OS.
I'm not sure if I'd say this was really a widespread scandal. This was just one of those things where Sony tried to do something cool and were promptly punished. Well, not promptly. They were punished for it in the end because, hackers were able to use that to... Well, hackers, I say, a specific group, Fail Overflow and George Hotz, were able to use that to break the PS3 encryption. So, Sony basically were in a rock and a hard place. It wasn't really being used by many people, and the people who were using it for that. So they got rid of it.
When Sony launched the PlayStation 3 in 2006, one of its big selling points was the Other OS feature. This allowed users to install Linux and run the console almost like a computer. Universities...
Not really a good one. I remember back in the day I tried this, and you didn't have access to any of the real the graphical hardware. Like, Sony really did not want you running pirated games on there, understandably. So it was gimped to the point of being kind of useless, not really something that should be entertained as a serious computing option for the normal user.
Hobbyists praised it, and Sony even leaned into that pitch in marketing, showing the PS3 as more than just a game machine. For early adopters, that functionality was part of what justified the PS3's hefty launch price.
Well, the main reason for the hefty launch price was the Blu-ray drive. Sony basically threw any chance of a smooth generation out the window when they put the Blu-ray drive in, this being right at the height of the format war between Blu-ray and HD DVD, right? So that was basically a sacrifice for, I guess, what you call the greater good.
Then, in 2010, Sony suddenly removed the feature through a firmware update.
Well, it wasn't sudden. Sony had made announcements about the removal of Other OS, this being related to hacking attempts, which, of course, being hackers, it only intensified, and it led to the 2011-2012 PSN short outage.
Citing security concerns, the move left many owners furious. People had bought the PS3 specifically for its versatility, and now that promise was gone. Hackers responded by digging into the system, lawsuits followed, and players argued they had been sold one thing and then had it stripped away after the fact. The legal battles dragged on for years. Eventually, Sony agreed to a settlement in which affected PS3 owners could claim compensation, typically around $55 or $65.
So not very much. But again, like I said before, it wasn't very useful as a Linux machine, right? And people were really just hacking with the Other OS option, right? There wasn't really much in the way of utility there for a normal user. Like you could only run it, I think, at 640 by 480. The graphics sucked. when you were using other OS. Like it was just a bad experience.
If they could prove they had used other OS. Sony admitted no wrongdoing, but the damage to trust was already done. For gamers, the PS3's other OS removal felt like a bait and switch.
Was it really for gamers? I wonder how many people actually used other OS.
Turning a flagship feature into one of gaming's most infamous scams, PlayStation Classic.
Ah, yes, the PlayStation Classic, a bit of a lazy reissue of software. This was clearly a hey, Nintendo's minis are doing well. Let's do our own. You know, it was that kind of thing. You know, not a lot of thought was put into this.
When Sony announced the PlayStation Classic in 2018, fans were excited. A miniaturized version of the legendary PS1, bundled with 20 preloaded games, it was supposed to be Sony's answer to Nintendo's hugely successful NES and SNES classic consoles.
Those NES and SNES classic consoles sold buku units. So yeah, Sony was very interested in getting a few of those dollars.
For $99, nostalgia seemed like an easy sell. But then gamers opened the box. Half the library was questionable, obscure or filler titles instead of classics fans expected. But the real outrage came from the versions of the games themselves. Sony had quietly included PAL 50Hz versions of several titles, even in North America. That meant the games ran slower and with uneven frame pacing.
This was the real issue, I think, with the PS Classic. Like the game selection, whatever. Sony back then relied even heavier on third parties than they do now. This was, you know, the PS1 was sort of the era where everybody was fleeing Nintendo and Sega. You know, the former being too much of a pain in the ass to deal with, and the latter being completely incompetent. So, like, a large part of the system's appeal, you know, PS1 was third parties, and you know, it's all about who you can get licenses for to put their games on your system. But this right here, there was no excuse for games that were released in America to have European versions on the PS Classic. Because we're at the point right now where everybody's playing 60 hertz or higher on PC. And everybody's got HDMI connections. You know, there was really no reason to have any 50 hertz versions of games on this thing.
Compared to the NTSC versions players actually grew up with. The decision made the games feel sluggish and unpolished.
Yep.
And reviewers called it an inexcusable shortcut. On top of that, the emulation software was buggy, input lag was noticeable, and there were no options for downloading or adding more titles.
I never had a PS Classic. I wonder if the bugginess was due to the emulation or due to the use of the 50 hertz thing. Because I know this thing got hacked to ribbons, and people were doing some hella good things with it, including replacing those 50 hertz games with 60 hertz versions. But yeah, I wonder. Again, I guess I'm picking at trying to find a reason for things to suck when they suck anyway, right?
What was marketed as a polished trip down memory lane felt like a rushed cash grab. The place.
That's because it was. It was a rushed cash grab, which is funny because after this you would get Sega entering the arena with the Genesis Mini, Mega Drive Mini for everybody else, and that was a very nice system indeed.
What was marketed as a polished trip down memory lane felt like a rushed.
But Sony had no idea what the hell they were
PlayStation
doing.
Classic didn't just underperform; it left buyers feeling cheated, like Sony had sold nostalgia on the cheap. Instead of celebrating history, it turned into one of Sony's most embarrassing missteps. Retron 5.
Ah, the Retron 5. It's an interesting little console. You know, the problem with the Retron 5, other than the stolen source code, is why the hell are they still using a barrel jack for an HDMI device? And that controller sucks, by the way. It has has a micro switch joystick, kind of like your Neo Geo CD or the Pocket or the Neo Geo Pocket, but like the ergonomics simply aren't there. and the button layout is way too weird to use for, say, Sega games. You know, which is why you would want to have 6 face instead of having the 4 face and 2 shoulder.
When Hyperkin released the Retron 5 in 2015, it was marketed as Ultimate Retro Gaming Solution. The sleek little box promised compatibility with 9 different cartridge-based systems,
Yep.
from NES and SNES to Genesis and Game Boy Advance. For collectors drowning in old consoles and wires, it sounded like a dream. But under the hood, the Retron 5 wasn't what buyers thought it was.
Well, for the most part, it was. I mean, it did the job. You know, it's yes, it's not an FPGA, but at the price it wasn't going to be. Definitely not at that time. And you know, again, the controversy over stealing some emulator source code. But for the most part, it does what it needs to do.
Instead of being true hardware emulation, it was essentially running open source emulator software, much of it written by independent developers who had specifically licensed their work for non-commercial use. Almost immediately, members of the emulation community recognized their code in the Retron 5 software. Developers accused Hyperkin of violating open source licenses by profiting off emulators without proper credit or source code release. Hyperkin denied wrongdoing at first, but as criticism mounted, they eventually promised to release the required source. Even then, the damage to their reputation stuck. To consumers, the Retron 5 functioned as advertised. You could still play your cartridges, but to the developers whose work had been quietly repackaged, it felt like a corporate cash grab built on unpaid labor.
Well, that's because it was. I mean, yeah, it like I said, it works. It does what it's supposed to, but they did it in a very shady way that they didn't really have to do. Did they ever release the source code? I'm not sure if they did. I'll have to check.
What could have been a beloved preservation device ended up being remembered as one of the shadiest of the modern era. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more.
You heard the man. Check out the Game Guy. And, you know, give him a like. Tell him Jesse sent you. And as for me, I hope you enjoyed the show. I know I enjoyed putting it together. Yeah, it was a great time. All right, I'll see you all later. Ooh, looks like this guy has some other console videos I might want to look at. But we'll get to that when we get to that. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the show. Have a wonderful evening, and God bless you.